see you. I'm sorry if your feet are hurting. Don't front. I know half of you, your feet are hurting right now. If anybody wants to come up here and sit on the front, feel free to do that. Like, this would be a great opportunity for you to come over here and get off your feet. It's just fine with me. But glad to be here. And this is as grassroots as it gets. And this is not gentrification either. I hope you understand that the brother who owns this, who helped start this program, I hope you heard him say 50 years ago this year, his family moved to this zip code. And so he's been here for generations. And so it's a cool thing. And I think it's a historic moment that a presidential campaign is starting right here in South LA, in the city, right? And, well, you know, somebody said, no, it's South Central. It just depends on who you ask. Some people say this is South Central. Some people say, and some people are even saying, like, I'm talking about even old school Los Angeles heads are saying, like, no, South Central is this way, it's that way.
It's right here.
It's South Central, all right? And so I understand, but I'm honored to be here with you. And if you have a few minutes, I'd like to teach a few things tonight, if that's all right. You know, I'm a historian by training. My undergraduate and graduate degrees are in history. I think most people, it's a weird thing, most people think of me as like an Instagram personality. I don't know what to make of that. I'm out in public all the time and I hear people who will be just a few feet away from me. I'll hear people whisper like, there's at Shaun King. And I'm thinking in my mind like, no. At is not a part of my name, right? This is me, I'm right here. And what happens is you just see people online and you begin to kind of see them as an extension of that. But I'm a historian by training, and my first jobs really out of college, and my passion was as a teacher. And my wife, many people don't understand this, I lived in Los Angeles and lived in California for years before you followed me on Instagram. And she taught right here in South Central. And so we know this community well, and that's part of why we spent our Christmas break here in California. We're going up the coast for the next 5 days, speaking all over California. Do you understand the historic moment that we're in right now? Like, I don't need to list out all of the problems that we're experiencing, but we're in a deeply problematic moment in American history, and you know that, and you know it well. Part of what makes this moment so painful is there are so many problems that it's hard to remember the problem that you learned about last week or yesterday or last month, because every day we're inundated with new information. And I get people who ask me all the time, Shaun, are things actually worse right now, or does social media just make it seem like things are worse? And the answer to that is both. Social media does keep us hyper informed in a way that we might not have been, particularly of information that mainstream news wouldn't tell us about. But the truth is that many things are worse. Mass incarceration is worse. Police brutality is actually worse. Poverty is actually deeper, and people will float, like when I hear even President Trump or others float out the stock market, I'm like, people in the zip codes I represent, they don't have a 401k.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like their wealth is not even centered in that. And so when people say the stock market is up, that normally doesn't even trickle down to the zip codes that most of us come out of. And so, like, this moment that we're in is a deeply historic moment where hate crimes are at a generational high. And I have to tell people all the time, it's hard to understand a moment in history when you're just living in it. Because today's just another day. Like, in your real life, you have to eat, you have to sleep, you still have to pay the bills, you still have to go to work. Like, your everyday life still feels normal. But this moment that we're in 2019 is not normal. It's a deeply disturbing moment. Bernie, as you may have seen, Bernie is in Iowa today. And just last week, you may have seen the news, Bernie was just there last night. There in Iowa, a woman drove over a young Latino boy, a girl actually, and almost killed her. literally saying, a white woman literally saying she did it because she was a young Latina. And then after they arrested her, they realized that she almost killed a young black boy earlier that day, but people didn't know it was her. Like, this is just an average day in America. Back in New York, just less than 48 hours ago, a man walked into a home where they were celebrating Hanukkah and just stabbed 5 Jewish folks. Somebody walked into a church and shot and killed 3 people yesterday. It's just like an everyday thing. And what happens is we get inundated with so much information that it just begins to feel normal. And it's not normal. Most of us don't understand that last year, 2018 was the deadliest year for gun violence in American history. The deadliest year ever measured. Most people, particularly when you talk to people in California or South Central, they think it's the 90s. Like, no, it was last year, the deadliest year in American history. And what I need you to understand, and maybe you've seen the polls, and I need you to understand it's not a rumor. Several polls have Bernie Sanders winning California. You understand how powerful that is? I've had an opportunity, my family and I, my daughter's here, my family traveled with me to California, and we had an opportunity to spend some real good time with Bernie over the past few months. And one of the things that I know he believed, like when he ran in 2015 and 2016, he believed that he had a great chance of defeating Trump. And I believe, and Bernie still believes, that had he been the nominee, he would have defeated Trump. I believe that to this day, and we're still paying the price for not nominating the right person to defeat Trump. And here's what I know, and it's why Bernie ran. Bernie believes to this very day that he is the candidate to defeat Donald Trump. And I hope you see every moment, because Trump knows he can't win California, he's taken these past few weeks and months to take digs on LA and San Francisco and the Bay, because he knows he'll never win here and has so little support here. Like, he has disrespected this state over and over again. And something weird happened because the primaries in California were generally deep in the summer. The primary in 2016 really had already happened and was almost over by the time California got a chance to vote. And so this time they've moved the primaries, and most people are thinking of the primaries as being on March the 3rd. But the truth is, starting on February the 3rd, you're gonna get a chance to vote. And here's what I know. It's gonna be hard for any nominee, Bernie or any other nominee, to win that nomination without California. And because it's been moved up, it's just that important. And I want to inform you of what we've decided to do. I hope you saw today that, Bernie Sanders has gotten a little bit of good press coverage for the first time in his entire life over the past few days. And I'm still a little skeptical when I see it, because these same networks, CNN, MSNBC, and others have been so shady with him in the past. This morning, the New York Times did a big story on who raised the most money in the fourth quarter, and the headline was about 2 other candidates not named Bernie Sanders, when Bernie raised significantly more than every other campaign. They announced today, and the full numbers will be out in just a few days, we still have a few more days left to give. Bernie Sanders is at almost 5 million donations, and no other political campaign, including Donald Trump, has even crossed 3 million. So this campaign is registering and is resonating with everyday people all over the country. And we see, and I help track donations, we see people giving $1, $2, $5, and the average donation is $18. And people are just giving what they can. But what we understand is that Bernie is resonating. And when they started seeing polls with Bernie Sanders in first and second place in California, the mainstream media finally started to take his campaign seriously. But what we understood, and it's why we're here in this backyard right now, is that while every other campaign really only has the resources and volunteers right now to be in Iowa or New Hampshire and South Carolina, Bernie has amazing operations there. We tried to use this week after the holidays It's kind of a sneak attack to get set up here all up and down the state. And I hope you understand it's extremely unique to even have an office in South Central.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not, many of us have worked in other presidential campaigns like, well, it's a real office with real people, like we're here.
Yeah.
Like this isn't just, we didn't just purchase a P.O. box in South Central, we're setting up shop. 2 days ago, we were in the East LA office and it was packed. And that zip code, like this zip code, has been ignored and discounted for generations. And people in that zip code, it touched me almost to tears because they talked about how they never imagined the presidential campaign even caring enough to set up shop. We were in the hood, in the valley, deep in the valley, opening up a brand new office there that we just opened up. All over Los Angeles, we're connecting with everyday people because here's what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to convert voters. The largest voting bloc in the United States are non-voters. Nearly 50% of all eligible people in this country don't vote at all. And here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to win at first. We're trying to win this block. And I need you to ask yourself, like, do we have enough people just right here tonight to win this block? Of course we do. Can we win this neighborhood?
Yeah.
Of course we can. Can we win this zip code? Is that, here's the thing, I just want you to just think, is that too big for you? Is it too big for us to win this zip code? Well, Bernie didn't win the zip code last time. Like, can we win this zip code?
Yeah.
Can we win this congressional district?
Yes, we will.
Right. Here's the thing. I need you to understand that Bernie is not going to win South Central. He's not going to win South LA. He's not going to win Los Angeles unless you make a pivot. And it's why I'm here tonight. I need you to make the pivot. And listen, Bernie, of all people, is honored that you are a fan and supporter of his. Listen, I am honored that you follow me and double tap on my Instagram post. That's great. But we need you to make the pivot from being a fan to seeing yourselves as organizers. Because if all of us vote, that's not enough. It just isn't. Bernie won't win Los Angeles if it's just us. Each person that's here, you're going to have to start asking yourself, how am I going to be able, not just to duplicate myself once or twice, but how am I going to be able to duplicate myself 10 times, 20 times? How am I going to be able to recruit enough friends and family and coworkers and neighbors? How am I going to be able to recruit 100 people? Now, if each of us here got 100 people to vote for Bernie, then we're going to win this zip code. We're going to win this district. But if it's just us, it's not enough. And let me tell you, that's what can be deceiving, even about our huge rallies. And I don't know if any of you got to go to the rally here in Los Angeles, but if that's all that voted, if the 20,000 plus people there vote for Bernie, that won't win LA. It's great. No other campaign is going to do that. But that's not enough to win. A rally is not a vote. And we're going to have to actually organize. And I want to talk to you about what that means. First and foremost, you're going to have to see yourselves as organizers. And you're going to have to pivot away from thinking of other people as organizers. That's what they do. That's what I do or somebody else does. It's going to need to be what you do. I don't even know after I leave California in 5 days, I don't even know if I'll be back in time before you vote next time. Like, it's on you. If Bernie's going to win Los Angeles, if he's going to win Southern California, if he's going to win up and down the state, you're going to have to make it happen. And here's what that means. First, you have to see yourself as an organizer. All right? Do you understand what I'm saying? The second thing you have to do is you have to understand that you are going to have to fight like our lives depend on it. Let me help you have a mind movie for a moment. Don't worry about the dog or the kids or anything else. That doesn't bother me. Have you ever had a moment in your life where your back was totally against the wall. Where I don't know what the situation might have been. You might be in it right now where you have more months than you have money. You have more bills than you have provisions. You're out of a job, whatever the situation might have been, or you might have been in trouble with a person or violence or whatever it might be. Listen, we're in that moment. This community, California, Southern California, is going to get to determine who the next president of the United States is. And it's you. Like, I need you to understand. Like, do you understand the cost of having Trump in office? You don't have to raise your hand, but many people here, and I know because you've told me, you've messaged me, many people here right now have family members and friends, and it may even be you, have people that are in fear of deportation, in great part because of how this administration goes. And I need you to understand that Bernie's policies on immigration, on mass incarceration, on the environment, on health care, he invited people like me to the table to help write those policies with him. Literally, if you go to BernieSanders.com and look at his justice reform policy, I wrote and edited that policy myself with a team of people that he assembled. And here's what's powerful. Many of you came, we did an event with Bernie Sanders here in Los Angeles in 2017. The man is like a sponge. I've seen other presidential campaigns, and listen, just so you know, I'm not paid to be here. I'm a volunteer. I'm an organizer just like you. I'm doing all of this for the love, right? I just need you to understand, like, I'm here because I think our lives depend on it. And I remember in 2017, it was the first time I got an opportunity to really be with Bernie like this, where even some of you who were there in the back room with us started sharing with Bernie the real impact of cash bail on families in Los Angeles. And we were explaining, and there were 5 women who were backstage with us who were part of Black Lives Matter in Los Angeles, were explaining to Bernie how mothers who would be jailed only because they were too poor to pay their bail would lose their kids. And they were explaining, not theoretically, they were explaining real situations to him of family and friends they knew who had their kids taken away over an unpaid parking ticket. And then they were summoned to court, but because they couldn't afford the fees, they were arrested and then lost their kids over it. And I literally saw the life drain out of Bernie's face, and he was devastated. Because basically in this city, and in cities all over the country, they criminalize poverty. What it is basically a crime to be poor. Because if you had committed that crime and were wealthy, you'd have been out of jail in 30 minutes. That's why Harvey Weinstein never spent a night in jail. I mean, I'm being dead serious. In New York, they don't even take him to Rikers. They just take him to booking and don't even take him back to the cell. They just, for rich people, they don't even take them all the way through the system. They pay sometimes in advance. It's one system for people who are broke and another system for people who have money. And when we started educating Bernie on the real life impact, he wasn't even running for president in 2017 when we had this event. Bernie started doing events for the love all over the country on eliminating cash bail. And I was shocked, and he made it a part of his issue. And when we wrote this criminal justice policy with Bernie, to this day, I could pass a microphone to him right now, and it's not just something on a website for him. And I need you to understand, the greatest indicator of who these presidential candidates are is not what's on their website. Because a lot of them pay people to write good sounding stuff to post on there, but they couldn't repeat it back to them if you made them. The greatest indicator is what they were doing 10 years ago, what they were doing 20 years ago. The greatest indication of who a presidential candidate is what do they do after they lose. And what I knew about Bernie was when he lost in 2016, he got right to work. He actually came back to California and did something. I introduced him at his first campaign event on this presidential cycle back in Brooklyn. You talk about cold, it was snowing, it was 22 degrees outside. He did something I thought was crazy. He went to Disneyland and literally said that he didn't think Mickey Mouse and Goofy would appreciate that the workers were paid less than a living wage. And he embarrassed and shamed Disney in Anaheim, which in Southern California just kind of crossed the line you don't normally cross. And less than 2 months later, Disney made the announcement that they were going to start paying their workers a living wage. They did it in Anaheim and in Orlando. He did the same thing with Amazon. And listen, he was doing that when he wasn't running. Many of you who are teachers or are connected to teachers, you experienced, Bernie came and marched and protested and demonstrated with the LA teachers unions and teachers unions all over the country for the love. I was watching the news one day and I had been talking to Bernie and his staff, and one day he just showed up at a march of Verizon workers, because Verizon announced that they have billions of dollars in profits, but their workers, it was like 8% of their workers were still on food stamps. And it's like, how'd you have $8 billion in profits, but people can't even afford to pay for their food? Bernie just on his own wanted to go and march with Verizon workers. I support Bernie because I know he actually believes the things that he says. And here's the thing. We need somebody that can stand up to Trump, that is the polar opposite of that man. With his integrity, with his views and his values, with his positions. And here's what I believe. I think Donald Trump is scared to death of going against Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Hello.
Now, many of you, it's a mistake to think, and this, I love this backyard. Like right now, this backyard looks like California.
Yeah.
Right? This looks like a real California audience. But a lot of times people look at the people in this backyard and they think that all black and brown communities are ultra liberal, and it's not really true. Like many of us come from very conservative families, and it might be your parents or your cousins or like we were just talking a minute ago, many of you are related to people who voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And it's just true. If you start looking at the stats, there's a percentage of people in all of our communities that voted for him. And what I hear from people, and what I've heard the past few days is like, listen, I don't know, because I know a lot of conservative people in my family or my community. I don't know if they'll vote for Bernie. Here's what I saw in 2015 and 2016. Bernie won every single county in West Virginia. One of the most conservative states in America. He won every single county. He won almost every single county in Wisconsin. In the city and out of the city. Bernie resonates with people all over the country because they know he's authentic. They know he's keeping it real. They know he's telling the truth. And if you see the polls and ask people across Democrat and Republican, who do you trust on health care? Who do you trust on jobs? Over and over again, for 5 years straight, Bernie wins those polls because people trust him. And here's what it's going to take. It's going to take you doing some things that maybe you've never done before. For a moment, just keep it completely real. How many of you have never made phone calls for Bernie? All right? It's at least half of us here. I make phone calls for Bernie. And I don't say it's hi, it's at Shaun King. Right? I don't even people I don't think even have any idea who it is or what it is. I want to tell you a story because this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I believe the campaign that knocks on the most doors in California with volunteers, knocks on the most doors and makes the most phone calls, I believe that campaign is going to win. You may have heard another Democratic, I put quotes around, another Democratic campaign was actually using prison labor to make phone calls for their campaign. It's something that if you did in a comedy skit, people would think you went too far with it. That a Democratic candidate was using cheap women's prison labor because he doesn't have volunteers. Here's what I know. Many of you may have participated in this campaign. 5 weeks ago, the state of Texas was scheduled to execute a man named Rodney Reed. And I was recruited by his family and the Innocence Project and others at the last minute. We were only 19 days left before he was scheduled to be executed to help stop that execution. And we formed a national campaign, and over 3 million people from all over the country, and more people in California signed our petition than anywhere else. And over 3 million people signed it. But here's what we learned, and I want you to catch this lesson because it's essential for what I'm about to ask you to do. We knew that every person that had to make a decision for Rodney Reed was a conservative Republican. The governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the entire board of pardons and paroles, all Republicans, the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals, all Republicans, and the primary state legislators that had power, all Republicans. And when I first looked at that, I wasn't sure exactly how I would leverage and influence those conservative Republicans to do anything. And what we decided to do was to make, and it sounds simple, but it was profound. We decided to get the millions of people who signed our petition to ask them to make phone calls to all of those people and their offices and their staff. And when they made phone calls, if any of you made the call, I was actually on the line in my voice telling you exactly what to do. And here's what we asked people to do. Don't yell, don't scream, don't cuss. Even though in your heart you might be burning with anger that this state is about to execute a man, we asked you to have kind, compassionate conversations where you explain to people that you thought they had gotten something horribly wrong and you want to explain to them why. And we had volunteers, not make 100,000 phone calls. We had more than 100,000 phone calls. We tracked 100,000 conversations that we held in 18 days with people in those offices. And every day we got people who would call us and email us and message us and say, Shaun, I might be crazy, but I think I got through to somebody. I had a powerful conversation with somebody, and at the end of the conversation, it seemed like they changed their mind. And just 4 days before Rodney Reed was scheduled to be executed, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, 9 Republicans, voted unanimously to stop that execution. Right. That was not going to happen until our campaign. Ted Cruz wrote a tweet saying, stop this execution. And all of that happened, listen, because we decided, listen, there is a time to scream. It's not knocking on a door when you're convincing someone to vote for Bernie Sanders. I want to admonish you, over these we are now less than 40 days away from when people are going to be able to vote. 5 Saturdays away. The ballots drop on February the 3rd, and then election day is on March the 3rd. But most of that voting is going to happen between February the 3rd and March the 3rd. If we lose between February the 3rd and March the 3rd, we lose the campaign. We can't put all our eggs on the election day basket. Let me tell you, when you knock on the door for Bernie, and you heard Michael Lighty, who was there in Iowa, in 0-degree temperature in one weekend, they knocked on 32,000 doors for Bernie. When you knock on a door in Los Angeles, let's be real, you're interrupting somebody's life. Now, they're going to remember some of what you said. Let me teach you. They're going to really remember how you said it. They're going to remember your positive energy. They're going to remember the compassion, the kindness, the warmth, the kind persistence. They're going to remember that you told them our lives depend on getting this right. Imagine if someone knocked on your door and in a way just short of being weird, they told you there was an emergency. I would listen. That's what we're dealing with. California is going to get to choose who the Democratic nominee for president is. And it's going to take you making phone calls you've never made. And how many of you came here because you saw me post about it, right? If you didn't RSVP, before you leave, we are volunteers here, we need to get your information. Because here in South Central and all over the city of Los Angeles, and many of you came from outside of Los Angeles, we are setting up offices and shops and operations tonight. We already have volunteers working all over the state tonight. Like while we are the first campaign doing this work, I still feel late. We have less than 40 days. How many doors do you think you're capable of knocking on? A gang of them, that's right, I like that. I like the way you think. And here's the thing, let me tell you, you might knock on a gang of doors. You might knock in one day, you might knock on 150 doors. That's a big day. And if you knocked on 150 doors and 5 people committed to you to vote for Bernie, that might seem like, damn, 5 people. But if we have 100,000 people getting 5 people to do it, that's 500,000 people. Like, what I need you to understand is if you get 5 people in one day, and he gets 5 people, and she gets 5 people, and he gets 5 people, and you do it again the next day and the next day, and we're doing it in every zip code all over this state, we win. That's how we win. Some people in the campaign asked me not to name names of other campaigns, and that's just how we're trying to roll. Other campaigns are not going to do it like this. They're going to rely on media interviews. They're going to try to rely on big name endorsements. And we're going to try to do it by winning zip code by zip code. And what I want to happen is on March the 4th, that's the day after Super Tuesday, when all the early votes have been counted and all the election day votes have been counted, there are 2 things I want to happen. I want each of us here tonight in this backyard with the dog barking. I'm believing that dog is a Bernie supporter. I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, he's feeling the burn is what that is support. That's not hate, that's support. There are 2 things I want to happen. I want you on the day after all of California's votes are counted, I want you to have the feeling of, I did everything I could. Like, I mean, you, and you, and you, and you. I'm going to have that feeling. And no matter what the result is, I'm going to wake up on the next day knowing, damn, that was everything I had. And the second thing is I want you to know how good it's going to feel when they are saying that Bernie Sanders gets all of the delegates of California because he won this state. Because you made phone calls you had never made before, you knocked on a gang of doors and got people to do it. Do you know how good it's going to feel? When he wins and you know you played a part, that's what I want for you. That's why I'm spending my Christmas vacation in a backyard with you. Now, I have a few homies and friends here, but most of you, I don't know you. It's that important. Here's the promise that I need you to make. I need you to become an organizer tonight. I need you to start making phone calls right away. And I'll tell you a little secret. I deal with social anxiety every single day. When I was sitting right over there getting ready to speak, I was nervous. And when you make those phone calls, you're going to be nervous. It's important enough to get through it. When you knock on a door, listen, I've done that. Damn, each door is hard. It's just that important. What would you do if your life depended on it? You'd knock on a door. You'd make a phone call. You would text your friends. You would post. Listen, Don't spend another day over the next 40 days arguing with trolls on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Not trolls for me, not trolls for Bernie. That doesn't win votes. Every argument you have on social media is a moment you are denying yourself the opportunity to knock on a door and make a phone call. And I'll close with this thought. I used to ask myself, I was born in 1979, just about 10 years after Dr. King was killed. As I drove through South Central, my daughter, who was born in the 2000s, asked me, she said, "Dad, where did the LA riots take place?" I used to ask myself, in the 90s, my best friend and brother Lee Merritt is here right now. He's a powerful civil rights attorney. Put your hands together for Lee. Lee was born and raised in South Central.
Yeah.
And many of you who respect Lee and know his work may not have even known that he was born and raised in this community. His family still lives in this community. When Lee and I went to Morehouse together, and Lee and I have been knowing each other, it gets longer and longer and longer. I used to say 10 years, now it's 20 years, and almost 25 years. I used to wonder who I would be if I was alive in the civil rights movement. I used to wonder, like, the question I used to ask myself when I was really young is like, would I be with Dr. King, or would I be with Malcolm X, or would I be with Dr. King, or would I be a Black Panther? Like, I used to ask myself that. Let me tell you, it's really hard to know who you'd be. But the greatest indication of who you would be if you were around during that time, the greatest indication is who you are right now.
Yeah.
And this is uncomfortable. But if you're not doing much right now, you wouldn't have done much back then.
Hello.
Because this moment right now is a lot like those moments back then. And the truth is, most people didn't march with Dr. King. There were actually, when I saw how many Black Panthers there actually were, I was like, oh, there was about 9,000 of them.
Yeah.
No, real talk, in total. Everybody, now everybody thinks they would have been a Black Panther. You wouldn't have been. We have a candidate. And I think this is so badass. We have a candidate that actually did march with Dr. King. Bernie was at the March on Washington. But we have a candidate, and I hope you've heard me tell this story, who literally in 1963 chained himself to two Black women outside of a Chicago public school because they were in the city of Chicago, forcing Black children in particular to go to schools that were despicable. And if you've ever seen that picture where they had to cut the chains off of Bernie and the two Black women he had chained himself to, Bernie was doing this in 1963. That even when the police, the Chicago PD, came to arrest Bernie, I love the picture, he refused to walk. He literally just let his body go completely limp and made the police carry him to the police car. He was a 20-year-old man. Bernie Sanders at the University of Chicago was the chapter president of the Congress of Racial Equality and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That's not BS. The greatest indication of who you be is who you were. Bernie's always been this way. And the greatest indication of who you be in the civil rights movement is who are you right now? Here's the good news. You have an opportunity to make a mark in history. This is history. This moment matters. Many of you are parents and grandparents. Many of you are children. Listen, if you're not old enough to vote, young man, you're old enough to volunteer. You're old enough to knock on the door. Because listen, I know how you feel about Trump. I can see it in you, young man. I have daughters who are 7 or 8 years old. They're at school dogging Trump out every single day.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. And I have 5 kids, but only 2 of them are old enough to vote. But all of them are old enough to volunteer. I don't know how old you are here on the back row. You old enough to vote yet? But you're here. You're old enough to volunteer and make a difference. And listen, when you wake up, young people, when you wake up on March the 4th and Bernie wins and you know that you knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors to make that happen, but you didn't get to vote, it's gonna feel good. And that's the feeling I want all of us to get. And for everybody in here who has a vote, we owe it to this young man and those 3 young people. We owe it to them to make sure that's happening. Listen, I gotta go. I'm counting on you. I'm gonna be traveling to Richmond and Oakland and San Francisco and other areas for the next few days. Some of you told me you were going to follow me for the next few days. Don't follow me. I need you to knock on doors in this zip code, right? And I need the people in those zip codes to knock on those doors. And so we need you to get to work right away. Let me tell you, these men and women who are here working and volunteering for Bernie are some of the most skilled, bright, resource organizers in the country. Other campaigns wanted these staffers on their campaigns. And so I want you to work with them. I trust them. They need to be able to contact you by phone and by email. And I want to make sure before you leave tonight that you don't leave without having your information registered with them. And before we leave, they'll make sure they get all of that, all right? God bless you. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get to work.
Give it up to Shaun King. Thank you so much, Shaun.